Welcome back to Whence, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
All right, this is episode 270. 270 episodes, guys. Pretty amazing. Really happy to be back this week. We've got a great show just ahead. But first, I got to mention our show sponsor. This episode of Whence is brought to you by MasonicRevival.com. That's a Masonic design group bringing you the latest fashion trends in Masonic accessories and regalia. You can check out their newest neckties, aprons, and accessories at MasonicRevival.com. I also want to mention this week that we will have our pins, tie bars, money clips, and yes, the cufflinks are back too, guys. We're going to be really excited about offering those again. The Support the Show page will finally go back up with the new images. We're going to have some really nice imagery to showcase these really nice items. I hope you enjoy. I did want to mention last week we had a great episode on the Masonic Roundtable talking about the secrets of Freemasonry, which was a really good episode. And this upcoming week, so if you're listening to this on Sunday night, well, you got 2 days. On Tuesday, we're going to be talking about King Solomon's Temple. It's something that I've done a lot of research on historically, factually, and of course, my soapbox, Frater O's soapbox, and so many of you know the allegory of the human body in Solomon's Temple, this Phoenician temple built in the Hebrew land. But I think we're going to talk mostly about the historical facts of this temple, the many different aspects of it, the sizing of it, and all this. So it should be a really great episode. Looking forward to it. I did want to congratulate Brother Nick Johnson for his induction into his latest honor of becoming a Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar priest. So really exciting for Brother Nick. It is a really huge honor. So congratulations, brother. So with all that, so we have a wonderful topic this week. We're going to get right into it. We talk with Frater O and Greg Kaminsky from the Occult of Personality Podcast about some amazing books from an esoteric standpoint. And I have dubbed this episode Reading Rainbow, Esoteric Edition. All right, everybody. Super exciting episode this week. We've got Frater O back on the program and special guest tonight, Brother Greg Kaminsky from the Occult of Personality Podcast. So totally stoked. I just got done telling everybody on the Masonic Roundtable I was having you guys on this week. People were text messaging me and they were saying, hey, you got to get them, because I told them we were going to be talking about their favorite books and some cool stuff. So they're really looking forward to hearing about books. This week, that's our topic. I've talked about my favorite books on Masonic Roundtable several times. This week, however, we're going to listen to some cool books. We're going to talk about them. I'll ask some questions, again, from Frater O and Greg Kaminsky. Brother Greg Kaminsky, that is. So, Brother Greg, great to have you on the program.
Thanks so much, Brother RJ. It's really great to be back, and thank you. I always appreciate the podcast, and thank you to Frater O as well.
Yeah, man, it's you have a great show. Anybody who says, you know, RJ, I love the off weeks where you and Frater O dive into the stuff, and I say, yeah, man. They say, when are you gonna just go full blast and do a whole show on like occultism? And you know, I'd love to. I don't have the time for an additional show right now, but if you're looking for that awesome stuff, you guys got to check out the Occult of Personality Podcast. Definitely appreciate it. And anybody out there who listens to Occult of Personality, members section, totally worth it. You got to get it. Frater O, how's it going, brother?
Oh, it's going great, man. I'm really looking forward tonight. I was thinking about this talk. I'm really fortunate to be able to sit down with my two really good friends and talk about topics we all really enjoy. So it's quite a blessing.
Yeah, no doubt. It's always cool to be able to just let loose, talk about the things that we're into, and not get some wonky stares, even though there's going to be some brothers listening who are going to go, what the hell are these guys talking about?
Yeah, I'm going to skip to the Masonic Minute.
I'm going to skip to the Masonic Minute. I'm sure we have some guys that do that. So we'll just start it off. Brother Greg, we'll start with you since you're the guest this week. What's one book that we can start off with, you think, one of your favorites, and we'll just kind of talk about it?
Well, I think if I'm thinking about Freemasonry, one of the books that is really close to my heart is Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. That one's just so full of ancient wisdom. It's almost unrivaled in many ways. But it's difficult for the modern reader, so thankfully we have a updated version with notes and whatnot that's helpful. So, I mean, that's really probably like the most important esoteric Masonic book I could think of right off the top of my head.
Really? So even like if we go back into antiquity, and I shouldn't say antiquity really, but let's go 1870 to like 1920. Even out of all that era and all of the wild books that we've got on numerous topics, Morals and Dogma still stands out to you?
I would say so. I mean, Albert Pike in particular during that particular era stands out to me, certainly among Masonic writers, but among esoteric writers generally. His vision, the way he was able to compare sort of vast scopes of time and distance and cultures, and I think really break down concepts and convey them in sort of elegant way.
Sure.
Again, it looks antiquated when you try to read it now.
Yeah, it does.
But if you can sit with it and really work your way through it, I think it will reveal all sorts of mysteries.
What I find fascinating about the text is that in a time when the world is not, well, I shouldn't say the world is not worldly. In a time when the United States was more center-focused, you had somebody like Pike who wrote about ideas and myths and stories from all over the world. I mean, he talks about Ahura Mazda in this book, where you're in the 19th century and you're thinking, what percentage of Americans at this point who are reading know who Ahura Mazda is? And it just kind of strikes a chord that he was so educated, and very, very interesting book for sure. I have never actually read it all the way through. I always get hung up on the run-on sentences, and the language is definitely trying.
But I mean, I get hung up on the lack of notes.
Yeah.
But I feel like a book's important symbolically because he's publicly, well, I mean, it wasn't originally written for the public, but he's publicly revealing a lot of what is the mythology behind Freemasonry. And I don't mean just to the Templars. I mean back to like deep antiquity, ancient civilizations, ancient religions, the symbolism, and how it carries through even to his day when he was writing it, to topics that were applicable right then and there. So he was able to match those up and sort of translate them for at least the reader at that time.
Yeah, definitely a cool read. Frater O, any thoughts on Morals and Dogma?
There's some really good books that continue on to kind of translate or break down Morals and Dogma, and that's by Henry Clausen. It's Clausen's commentaries on Morals and Dogma. You can get it really cheap on Amazon for $3 to $5, and it's short, sweet. It gets right to the nitty-gritty with punctuation, which is nice.
Wait, did you say $3 to $5?
Yeah, $3 to $5. They're pretty cheap. Used, of course. This was actually one of the things when Henry was the sovereign grand commander of the Southern jurisdiction, they gave it with Morals and Dogma to the candidates. It's a great read, short, sweet. Also, the Grand Lodge of Texas did a big project too, and they translated Morals and Dogma with their footnotes on the side. I'm not sure if the Grand Lodge of Texas is still selling it. I know there's copies that float around. It's a great breakdown. And then didn't De Hoyos do a book as well?
Yeah, so De Hoyos routinely goes through and makes notes and annotates some of the Masonic classics as maybe we would describe them. So Morals and Dogma, that's number one. Frater O, what do you have? What's one of your other favorite books?
Made it a thing before I came on the show to not bring up a book that I haven't spoke about in the show. So I'm going to bring up some new books, but one of them in particular is by Henry C. Clausen, the person I just spoke about. And he wrote a book called Your Amazing Mystical Powers, published by the House of the Temple. It's really, really nice. It gets really deep into the esoterics and what the Scottish Rites presents. The really important fundamentals of a Mason. Manly Hall wrote the foreword of his book. It gets into the power of just like simple thing of concentration, meditation, simple aspects, to really getting to know thyself. the ultimate principles, which a lot of books talk about, but it's all his work. So I'm going to digress, maybe throw another of his other two books. It's Beyond the Ordinary and The Emergence of the Mystical. Those two other books that he did. He's a great writer, and he was great for the craft. And if you get a chance, his books are all used. They're fairly cheap online. Have you guys ever read any of Clausen's work at all?
I haven't. But let me ask you guys this. I mean, did you say that Clausen was a commander of the Southern Jurisdiction?
Yes. I
think it's really funny. We start with two books that we had Sovereign Grand Commanders of the Southern Jurisdiction. What else I find interesting, too, is I think if you would trace book publishings by Sovereign Grand Commanders going from oldest, right, so Albert Pike, going to Clausen, possibly to... As you get more toward the modern day, I wonder if they get less and less esoteric.
Funny you mention that. I have a book that is from one of them. Well, I'll talk about it later, but yeah.
Well, I mean, so the Northern Jurisdiction, I mean, if a Grand Commander from the Northern Jurisdiction wrote a book, it might be titled something like The Importance of Giving Rides to Your Friends When They Have to Go to the Hospital. Those particular books, the first one you mentioned, it's called Your Amazing Powers.
Yeah, it's Your Amazing Mystic Powers.
Your Amazing Mystic Powers.
And on the cover is actually the house of the temple, the grand big room they have upstairs.
You mentioned the foreword by Manly P. Hall. Was that before he was a Mason, or do you think it was...
Yeah, this was published, the first edition was published in 1985.
So he was definitely a Mason.
He was, yeah. I know him and Hall were very, very, very close. I think Hall does a lot of his, actually, intros for... his books.
Hall wrote so many intros. It's actually really amazing. I said I wasn't going to get into books I was reading, but I am reading this one right now. George H. Steinmetz and Joseph Krieger wrote this book, and the foreword again is by Manly P. Hall. And actually, the foreword in the book, there is a nice, it's a facsimile, so I'm showing the fellas on screen, even though you guys listening can't see it. But there's a painting in the book on the first page. It's The Murder of Hiram, and it says the Hiramic legend from the original painting by A.J. Knapp, never hereto published, courtesy of the Philosophical Research Society Library in Los Angeles. And the foreword goes on, and it's by Manly P. Hall, and he basically says, hey, George Steinmetz and Joseph Krieger are two really cool students of mine. They wrote a good book. So I think it was really kind of funny. They were both students at this
PRS
Philosophical Research Society there in Los Angeles. But just the same, if you guys are looking for some interesting books and you don't know exactly what you're looking for, if you go on Amazon or anywhere, or you look up Kessinger Legacy reprints, they have all these fantastic occult books that are facsimile reprints available in like paperback for like $10. But then if you paid the extra like 12 or 13, you get a hardback. It's pretty nice. We'll go back over to Greg. What's another cool book?
Another cool book, I think, although I personally don't like the Kessinger editions myself.
You would disagree.
Yeah, I just, I just don't feel like they really do justice to these books.
No, they don't. They really
but they do make them available, so it's a double-edged sword. So the one I like is Restorations of Masonic Geometry and Symbolry, being a dissertation on the lost knowledges of the Lodge by H.P.H. Bromwell. This is a phenomenal book. I think it unlocks hidden dimensions of Masonry with regard to the design of the lodge and the geometry and the floor work and the position of the officers, and how all of that is a lot more intricate and well thought out than maybe it at first appears. In terms of Masonry being symbolic, every motion, every word, every action is symbolic, and therefore the place it's being done is also important.
You realize that so many parts in the lodge line up to different things. We've talked about very surface level and very easy things to pick up, like the senior and junior wardens, sun, moon type thing. But how deep does this book go? I mean, is it fairly in depth then? How long is it? It would take the average reader, you think?
Several hundred pages, and there's the addition of really detailed geometric diagrams. Very, very nice. So if you can get like the the really nice reprint of the book. It's well worth it. I mean, I don't think I could do it justice, trying to summarize it, but
Sure.
it is of all the books on Freemasonry that I've read so far, it's definitely one of the top ones in terms of like unlocking hidden dimensions of Masonry that I didn't really fully know about.
So one of the things I find that pretty interesting is you can talk to guys like Frater O and myself all day long about esoteric books and things that we think are fascinating. It's no secret. I mean, a lot of people already know Greg is kind of a genius. So the fact that when you find these...
Not true.
Well, when Greg says something is really interesting, he's very hypercritical, I feel, a lot of times with certain theories and things, and he tends to break them down. He can break them down and tell you probably why it's not true, or he can point out the fallacies in certain theses and things. So if Greg says, check this out because it changed his mind on something or it opened his eyes to something, I think that's a pretty damn good endorsement. We'll have to definitely provide links for all these. Oh, absolutely.
There's the Grand Lodge of Colorado for a while was reprinting that book.
No way.
That's a great version.
It's reasonable if you try to find the used versions. Or the old originals, they're 500 plus, unfortunately.
Ugh. What are we talking? Maybe Colorado version? Is that maybe like around 100 too?
75 it was? They
I think it was 75.
They stopped selling it on the website, but it does pop up on Abe Books as well as eBay all too often.
All too often, so we need to go ahead and grab those. Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. If you see it, definitely grab it.
So you guys are literally costing me money as we talk. So
Thank God I already own one.
yeah, no doubt. It's so funny, we start collecting these books and then you get them and they go up on the bookshelf and you just start going through them and they end up being like gold. I get a book delivered probably every week or every other week and my wife's like, another one? You haven't finished the last 3. I know, but I will get to them. I promise.
You have to start reinforcing the idea that they're not just for reading. You have a reference library that you're building.
It's a reference library.
You never know when you're going to need one of these books to pull out to find a fact.
See?
There it will be.
There it will be. You heard it here. Frater O gave us 3 books. This last one. You kind of talked about those other 2 that were by the same gentleman. How about another one? What do you got?
So this is it's 3 books in one, written by the past Grand Master of District of Columbia. It's from Most Worshipful and Glorious Brother George R. Adams. It's 3 books inside of one. Again, The Inner Journey to the East, Meditations of a Master Mason Along the Way, and Masonry for the Millennium. 3. It's a paperback. It's pretty small. 3 short little books inside of it, and it's very, very, very
introspective.
Introspective. Thank you very much.
Sure, I had to dive into the thesaurus that is my head also.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a great read. I highly, highly recommend it. He's a very, very active brother in DC. He's done a lot for the craft.
So this was actually written by somebody currently living.
He's very active in the Scottish Rite in DC. And it was one of those things. I never heard about the book. We sat in a philosophical college together. We were having some very deep discussions on the pineal gland, and he was like, "Hey, here's my book," and I was completely blown away. And any brother who's deep into the esoterics, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. You can get it fairly cheap on Amazon. Check it out.
Cool. So you did mention there's meditations in there, or meditations was part of the chapter. Are there actual like mantra meditations?
So this is cool. That's a great question. He has it broken down, and I think it's book number 2, into each day. I think he covers, it's 40 days. Each day is a mantra.
Oh,
so
that's
the
cool.
Inner Apprentice is a section. It's like day 1. It breaks down like a simple kind of just like prayer meditation. And it's really, really nice. So meditations for 40 days, and then it's a breakout of all 3 Master Masons, so each kind of into sections.
Cool.
Which is really sweet. And then the 4th book is more like how do we transform the craft into the 21st century.
Interesting.
That's kind of a wild leap to go from spiritual into, that almost sounds like dealing with the membership problem.
He gets into that. He brings up a really good point. I mean, it's one of the oldest corporations in the world.
Yeah.
And how do you properly manage it and keep it evolving? brings up some really, really good points. What about you? I know, we covered a book earlier. I know, do you want us to skip you? I mean, it's up to you.
Well, all right. So I what book I did just finish was Inner Workings, The Origin and Meaning of the Master's Word by a gentleman named Hunter. Basically, it's a book that compiles tons of research, and there's a few in-depth discussions involving all of the efforts of trying to figure out the lost word of Freemasonry. It goes about it in a way of historical research. So it doesn't deal with esoterics. It's looking at the origin of our password, our grand omnific word. And it traces, it basically throws out the idea that it's a Hebrew origin, because they say that in this book, which I believe is written by a non-Mason, the word that we use today, it couldn't be Hebrew because the legend, the Hiram legend, didn't start until the 1700s. So it's really speculative. It's an interesting idea, but where it draws a lot of its information from are the exposés on Freemasonry. There's a huge chunk of the book taken from William Morgan, from the Morgan Affair, and his expose, which this particular author feels is the best expose on Freemasonry that had existed at the time.
So how does it, how do I ask this question? How does it get around like the other words that clearly are Hebrew?
Yeah. So basically, the author says it can't be Hebrew in origin because the Hebrew origins of Freemasonry are attached to Masonry, starting with the Master Mason degree at 1724, and since the passwords existed in the craft as early as the 14th century, it has to be a medieval English word that they really did lose the meaning for, which is almost a double entendre in the fact that we are looking for a lost word or lost meaning. So I'm not sure how he goes about it really to describe it besides having to read it, but it's interesting. It's very heavy. I hate to even make this reference, and maybe some people will get it, maybe some people won't, but there's a South Park episode, I'm going there, where a Jeff Goldblum character is like making random connections to things in order to solve a mystery, and that's kind of what I feel like is going on in this book etymologically. So he takes words and he goes, which could be this, which after time gets corrupted to this, which means this, and has a double meaning, and they lost the first meaning, which is really what it is. And so it is just a roller coaster of, I'm going to use air quotes and say facts. But it is good. And I actually, backstory on this book, I actually called Greg Kaminsky because I had questions about this, and Greg pretty much dispatched some of the theories right away. So I had a good foot on the ground on terra firma going into the book because Greg was like, here's some cement shoes, stay on the ground, buddy. Which was good.
I'm glad I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely excited. I think I talked to Frater O about it the next day. I was like, oh man, thank goodness for Greg. So Greg, what's another good one that you've enjoyed that is possibly off in the deep end or wherever you want to go?
Okay, so the next one I think is a book that everybody listening to this should read, although, you may find it a little bit challenging. It was written in the late 1460s. It's referred to as the Oration on the Dignity of Man, although it was originally just the Oration, or Oratio. This is by Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. And this is his, basically, it's an excerpt of his defense for his 900 theses that he was going to debate at the Vatican with the Church Fathers and the Pope, and basically defend the whole concept of the ancient wisdom narrative, that there's this stream of ancient esoteric wisdom that's at the heart of Western civilization and religion, and it's hidden beneath all these things, but it's really one thing, and these are all just expressions of it. And his goal was to kind of syncretize all of philosophy, religion, theology, Kabbalah, and natural magic are really at the root of this ancient tradition, and how it is a way for man to know God, but also to know that he's capable of knowing God. Or he doesn't use the word gnosis, of course, because that would be way too heretical, but that's really what he's getting at, is a sort of enlightenment type experience. And he gives you like a very basic kind of overview or prescription of how to achieve that in a philosophical, contemplative kind of way. But it's really this document and his work in general that I feel is really at the heart of Western esotericism and, by extension, Freemasonry.
Sure, that sounds fascinating. So, I mean, you said written in the 1460s. I mean, is the language, a lot of words definitely spelled way differently? You got to read it and read it and read it to get it?
Well, I mean, it was originally in Latin, so there's English translations, and
Okay.
the modern translations are very readable.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well,
And it's not a long text either, But this was really like the first time that this stuff was publicly declared, because he was willing to risk his life to do this, to put this on the line.
Right.
And he did end up dying, probably was assassinated very young as a result of this and the rest of his work.
What other kind of things was he into?
He was very much into Kabbalism. He could be considered the originator of the Christian Kabbalah. He was responsible for the translation of some of the earliest Kabbalistic texts into Latin. He had an incredibly deep understanding of that tradition and how he could apply it to Christianity, to his Christian faith. He was basically hounded by the Vatican and was protected by the Medici family.
Right.
Protected, but also kind of like bound to them. He was sort of survived at their pleasure because they were the only ones defending him. But, he was very interested in religion and trying to find these comparative dimensions to syncretize ideas about different traditions. So I feel he's really like the father of Western esotericism. A lot of the things that we think of as the characteristics of the esoteric tradition, he pointed out and really developed these ideas publicly. I mean, he's a brilliant philosopher. He's like a prodigy.
Right. That sounds fascinating. Yeah, we'll have to definitely put links up to all these books. But yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's absolutely must-read material.
And is that pretty much available on certain places, or is that something that's maybe special order?
No, I think there's paperback editions available.
Okay.
There's probably an online version available,
Like archive.org or something, maybe?
I think there's some university that's got a translation online. I can send you a link.
Cool.
Let's see.
So, Frater O, what's another good book?
Yeah, there's one book that I picked up recently and kind of stumbled upon it at the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction Library in Lexington, and it's called The Master's Lecture, as delivered in Evans Lodge number 524, Ancient, Free, and Accepted Masons of Evanston, Illinois.
Oh, yeah, that's just, right down the street from me, actually, literally.
Really? This is an amazing book. I highly recommend checking it out. You can get it for $30 right now on Amazon. And it's very, 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 very deep. It gets into 12 different chapters, each breaking down initiation, fraternity, toleration, faith, truth, charity, morality, patriotism, symbology, philosophy, happiness, and immortality. And each chapter breaks down philosophical quotes, and then it breaks down the month of January, the esoteric significance, the sign Aquarius, and then the number one and the significance of the number one. It breaks down deeply each aspect of that, and then it gets into the idea of initiation, and it pulls from a lot of different sources through all of esotericism, but as well as in Masonry, and lots of quotes. It's really based up on a lot of fact, not some crazy conspiracy hunky junky or crazy esoteric stuff. But it's really, really amazing, from Aristotle to philosophies to Pike to Thoreau. It's all in there, and highly, highly recommend it. For me, it was a very significant read to find while I was there, and check it out. It's great.
Cool, will do. Yeah, especially
cool.
I would wonder if I could maybe I'll buy a copy, and then maybe we can make a presentation to the lodge, like a homecoming for the book.
Well, if you know the people at the lodge, I think it'd be great if we could just read a chapter, just do a segment on the show and just break down, like, hey, the month of January is significant of X.
Right.
So this would cover like 12 episodes for the year, and fill in. There's a lot to be learned. I learned a lot from it.
Awesome.
I would bring up a book at this point, but I started to think about something when you were naming some famous Masonic authors. And I've read a book or two from this guy, but I just, maybe just to take a quick break in this, what are your thoughts? And I'll ask each of you, what do you guys think about A.E. Waite? Have you guys read his stuff at all?
Of course.
I have.
What do you guys think? What are your thoughts? We'll start with Greg. What are your thoughts on A.E. Waite? And because in some aspects he sounds so good, like I can follow it. And then sometimes I feel like you totally just went batshit crazy.
Yeah. So this is what I think. Waite wrote a tremendous amount, like the number of books, and in each book, huge tomes, a lot of them. And he wrote over so many years. So yes, a lot of his work is exceptional. A lot of his work is mediocre. So it spans a range, sometimes in the same book.
Yeah, that's
one
what
of
I
the
noticed.
texts that really stands out to me of his is Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. I don't know if you have that one.
I didn't read that, no.
Yeah, that's a really, really great book. But in it, he makes claims about things that I feel are completely wrong. Completely wrong.
Yeah.
So you have to take the good with the bad. I mean, the guy was brilliant in some respects, but in others, I feel like his research didn't hold up, and he's a human being,
Yeah.
He certainly wasn't perfect, but you got to give him credit because his work is just like a huge, tremendous, really monument to esotericism.
How about you, Frater? Any
To go
thoughts?
on what Greg said, huge archive. Personally, his Egyptian mythor and his writings on that topic, I found with like Rosicrucian lineage was quite fascinating. Have I read it all? Absolutely not. A very, very fascinating character. His Egyptian books I highly recommend.
Yeah, so I brought it up. I was reading a book of his not too long ago, actually, and I remember hitting a point within the book, and I just went, whoa, this guy just literally took it into the realm of, like, I'm pretty open-minded, but sometimes he'll hit a spot where I just go, no, man, that's just wrong. I mean, that is a fundamental thing that we know today is just not true. But yeah, like you said, you got to give him credit, right? I mean, the guy wrote tomes.
Yeah, if nothing else, I mean, he's crucial to the conversation on whichever subject you're researching because he's written about it, and he's an authority on some level.
Yeah, I have a tarot deck with his name on it.
Is it the Waite Trinic Tarot or the normal Rider-Waite?
Rider-Waite, that's the one.
Yeah, he has another tarot deck that he designed. It was like a secret tarot deck for his Holy Order of the Golden Dawn, which I think was like a breakaway Christian order. And those tarot images are pretty sweet. Very different than the Rider-Waite deck.
Yeah, I just recently, everybody listening to the show is like, you guys are talking about tarot, now you're talking about books, now you're talking tarot. Sorry guys. So I recently got a cool tarot deck, a Masonic tarot deck. Actually, Frater O shot me a message on Messenger about it, and so I'm reading just the little pamphlet in it, and it talks about, it's describing like the degrees in Freemasonry, the first degree, and I'm reading it going, no, that's not right at all. No. So it's kind of funny. Like, I don't know if it's a clandestine ritual or maybe it's Memphis ritual or something else, but it's interesting. If you guys get a shot, I'll put a link up to that tarot deck too. It's a new deck. I think it's $20 or $30, but it's kind of interesting. The artwork's cool, to say the least.
Is at least the artwork accurate?
No. So
you shouldn't. This sounds like something nobody should buy.
I'll take some pictures. I'll send you guys so you can see some of the wonky stuff. But I just have an affinity for playing cards, and I was like, that sounds cool.
I mean, conceptually, it sounds like should be great, but if it's not accurate.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to how accurate it is. I mean, I'm only just now starting some of my studies in tarot with builders of the Addendum, so I'm starting to kind of grasp certain concepts with it. So I'm in very, very, very beginner stages. I just talked about A.E. Waite and tarot instead of a book. But Greg, we'll do one more round and we'll go through. So Greg, what's another good book?
Let's see, I'm gonna go a little outside of the range we've been talking about and recommend a book called The Kabbalistic Mirror of Genesis. So this is a book that's obviously about the Kabbalah and about the book of Genesis and the creation story, but it's interpreting it in a completely different way. And I think the importance of this book is that it can reveal hidden dimensions of symbolism in places where previously, we've been many times and never seen them. And so it's analogous to Freemasonry, of course, not only because, we use the same book, but because the situation of being somewhere many times and then being privy to new dimensions of insight that open up and get unlocked as you evolve and sort of unfold and get to know things more. So this book really does that from a Kabbalistic perspective and using the creation story. But it also, I think, is important because it gives people a little bit of an insight into what gnosis actually is.
Sure.
Because most sources, you can't get a handle on what it is other than some sort of experience of the divine. But what does that mean? This book will give you some insight into what that actually means.
That sounds fantastic. I'm glad you saved it. Best for last kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah, it's by David Chaim Smith, who's also an artist. So it's got text and imagery, and the imagery is phenomenal too. So it definitely will be a pleasure for people to read.
Excellent.
His work is amazing. And Greg, you've interviewed him a few times on the show as well.
Yeah, I've interviewed him several times on Occult of Personality Podcast. So in the membership section, I think there's like 3 or 4 interviews with him, and there's one publicly available on the podcast if you go to the available shows page.
Sweet. Yeah, well, definitely we got to put up links to those because obviously if you're not listening to Occult of Personality, you got to listen.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you gain so much.
I agree, of course.
Right. If you guys have never listened to Occult of Personality, Greg has guests on that span the gamut as far as occultism, Gnosticism. He's even had some people on his program that I would consider like kind of some stars. I mean, really, he's got people on that have been on shows that deal in like I think you had a gentleman on recently who I recognized his voice instantly from like Ancient Aliens. He talked about the blood. Yeah, Nick Redfern. He was on and he was talking about some great stuff. Rh negative blood types.
That's right. Yeah. Some sort of strange RH factor being related to, according to him, to aliens. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's spanned the gamut. So if you guys are really interested in just a variance of topics and cool stuff, you got to check it out.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people on talking about esoteric aspects of Masonry, although, they may be controversial in certain circles.
Sure.
Angel Millar, Robert Sullivan, Timothy Hogan.
The membership section, though, of your site is awesome. I mean, just what you hear surface level, you go so much deeper and you're able to get into the meat and the potatoes, past the surface level of the interview and really get into that person's aspect or research or book, and it's definitely worth the money.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I would agree. So before we close anything out for the episode, we got one more book. Frater O, what do you got?
Decisions. There's a book I usually hand out to a lot of like new Master Masons that want to get into esotericism. And it's Freemasonry in the 21st Century by Don Bradley. It's kind of a rare, crazy read, but it really gets into the allegory that Robert and I speak a lot about on King Solomon's temple and pertaining to the human body, and more of the mystical aspect on the significance of like why initiation, doors into teaching, and then comparing it to other mystical schools that have existed throughout society or throughout history. And then really gets into the charges that are represented in each degree. So if you're a Mason listening to this and you really want to, hey, like that second degree lecture, I didn't quite get everything, and I know there's a lot more deeper things, this book is just straightforward, really well written, and gets right to the aspect. And it was wonderful to kind of like, read this book, go through it and go, man, that's another whole level. I never really looked at it, especially with the charges. And yeah, it's wonderful. It really gets into the oath, gets into everything that you went through as the ritual, broken down esoterically in current modern day English. So
that sounds great. What's the availability like that on that book?
I think it's like $3, $5 used on Amazon.
Oh, sweet. So pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's great.
Nice.
Well, we're going to wrap this week. So we'll wrap this week. My thanks to Brother Greg Kaminsky from taking time out of your busy schedule. If you guys get a chance, definitely check out the Occult of Personality Podcast. It's on iTunes and it's on the website. The exclusive content is via the website. You definitely want to check out that membership section. Also, Brother Greg does some pretty kick-butt classes at the Hermetic Arts Learning Center. Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about some of those classes?
Yeah, thank you, Brother RJ. I appreciate that. So I do some different classes, including Atlantis, the Lost Civilization, talking about both archaeological, symbolic, and metaphysical aspects of the Atlantis mythology. I also do a presentation on the Kabbalah and its relation to the Renaissance and Freemasonry and utopianism and political revolution and a variety of other subjects. So that's an interesting subject as well, I think, too. So a lot of good classes at the Hermetic Arts Learning Center, too, as well. So if people are in Salem, Massachusetts or nearby, they should definitely check it out.
Very cool. I know the fact that you have something that sounds that cool, like in your neighborhood, is pretty BA. I don't have anything like that around here. So maybe you talk to the owner. Maybe you start some franchise opportunities.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, you should definitely figure that out because there's some starving folks out there in terms of Gnosticism, knowledge, gaining some additional light, as we say.
I also want to mention there's an upcoming event next year, Masonic Con, put on by the Ezekiel Bates Lodge in Attleboro, Massachusetts, that will both be attending. All three of us will be attending, I believe.
Yeah.
And they're going to have... it's going to be speakers, presentations, roundtable discussions, and lots of different really interesting stuff to talk about.
Definitely exciting for MasonicCon. We've got links to that up on WCY Podcast under events. Also, you can just go to Ezekiel Bates' website and check that out. We'll have links to it. Greg, thanks again for being on the show, brother. It's been outstanding.
Brother RJ, Frater O, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, and I can't wait to talk to you guys again. Thank you. Absolutely.
Frater, thanks for coming on the show this week. I know you're a busy guy, too.
Thanks for having me, and Greg, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to be back with some cool papers. I've got a great segment by illustrious Brother Stephen L. Harrison for the Masonic Minute. And I'd like to just remind you, please support the show by going to wcypodcast.com, clicking on the Support the Show link, and checking out any one of those retailers there. They all have exclusive deals with you, the listeners of this show. Please use the coupon code WCY when checking out, with the exception of Banker's Best. So if you go to buybankersbest.com, you can use the promo code BBWCY357 and you'll get 20% off instead of 10. Also, please be kind to our show sponsor, Masonic Revival, who has been fantastic and instrumental in allowing us to fundraise for this program. This is really exciting. The pins and everything that we've offered in the past, of course, we're going to continue their availability. This time, though, these are being done by Masonic Revival. Very excited to have Masonic Revival do our pins, our tie bars, bunny clips, and yes, again, the cufflinks, which are a premium product. So please do check those out. They will be available on WCYpodcast.com shortly, and once they are, I will make a huge announcement. It's going to be a big deal. So I hope you guys are all excited. Just a note that King Solomon's Reserve Beard Oil is still available, and you can only get it through our website, so click through there. And of course, your donations are welcome, and they are primarily the main source of funding for this program. So this is listener-supported Masonic education. You guys are the producers. Every dollar you donate, every dollar that comes from these show sponsors goes right back into production of this show. You guys have funded 270 episodes, countless weeks and months of hosting fees from our hosters. It's just been fantastic. Web fees and all those things to keep the website up to date, and owning the .com that we have and keeping all that up to date is very important, and you guys make it all possible. So thanks so much for allowing Masonic education to spread like this and for this program to go on, and thank you so very much for allowing me to bring it to you. It's a great pleasure on my part, and something that it's my way of giving back to the Masonic fraternity for what they've done for me. So thank you so much, everybody. If you do like Masonic podcasts, and I know you do, again, check out the Occult of Personality Podcast. It's wonderful. Go to the website to check it out. And then, obviously, Tuesday nights, 10/9 Central, the Masonic Roundtable, where you can find me live almost every Tuesday in case I've got some other business going on. Again, this week, it'll be really cool talking about King Solomon's Temple. Unless we have a last-minute change of topic, but we should be good. I think we're locked in on that, so check it out. So with that, thanks so much for listening, everybody. Have an amazing week. Until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.